Hey guys, Netherite Dev here, welcome back to another video. Today's video, we are starting a new series on how to make a game like Blade Ball. This is part 1 where we will be making the starting system. As you can see, it says starting in counts down from 15. When it hits 0, the players are teleported to the match, which will continue until some player dies, or all the players die except for one. After that happens, it'll print out the player's name here, and it says has won the match, and then everything will restart all over again, just like in Blade Ball. So yeah, I hope you find this tutorial helpful, and yeah, let's just go ahead and get right into it. Hey, Vsauce, editing dev here. When watching back through the intro, I realized I forgot to mention this, so I just want to mention it real quick. But if you're the only player to join, like there's no other player, it'll say waiting for players until there's more than one player, and then the game will start counting down the queue from there. And also, if you leave the queue while it's counting down, it'll stop counting down and display this again. Okay, anyway, back to the video. Toodles. Go. Bye. Alright, so to start off, I've built myself a simple lobby area and a gameplay area. So before you get started with this tutorial, make sure to build these two things. Obviously, you can make yours look way prettier than mine. Mine was just made in like 2 minutes for the sake of the tutorial. But once you have these two things, we're going to need to do some more preparation, starting with spawn areas for our player to spawn in the map. So in Workspace, you can add in a folder, and you can go ahead and name it to spawns. And from here, you can just go ahead and insert a part into Workspace. You can move it to sort of the edge of the island, and then you're just going to duplicate this part like a lot of times around the entirety of the map. These are going to be our spawns where the players can spawn in. Once you have created all of your spawns, you're going to select all of them, and you're going to move them into the spawns folder that you created a few seconds ago. From there, you can select all the spawns and make them transparent. Now we need to number every one of these spawns. So basically, for every spawn, you're going to set the name of it to a number. So the first one's going to be 1, the second one's going to be 2, the third one's going to be 3, and you're just going to keep counting up each one of the spawns. That is going to be their name. This is how we're going to determine where the players spawn in later. When you're done, all of your spawns should be numbered in order like this. Make sure you do not skip any numbers, or else the script might break later. Lastly, you're going to select all of them one final time because I forgot to make sure that they're anchored. And also you can set can collide to off, so make sure they're anchored and they cannot be collided with. And if you want to, you can also go ahead and lock them. Basically what this does is it means you can't accidentally select them. So when they're unlocked, you can select them by hovering over them, but when you lock it, when you hover over them, nothing appears. Now in replicated storage, we can go ahead and add in a folder. We're going to name this to round system, and inside of this we can add in a remote event, and we can go ahead and name that to update text. And the last thing we're going to do to prepare is in starter GUI, we can add in a screen GUI, and we can name this to main GUI. And you can go to properties and make sure that reset on spawn is unchecked. Then in this UI, we can add in a text label, and we can set the size of it to 1, 0, 0.1, 0, and set the position to be 0, 0, 0, 0. We can make the background transparent, make the text scaled, text color white. You can set the font to Fredoka 1. And then inside the text label, you can add in a UI stroke if you would like. And you can set the stroke mode to contextual and the thickness to 3 or 5, something like that. And you can go ahead and name this text label to status, and make the text label invisible, so set visibility to false. Alright, so one last thing before we start scripting the intermission, we are going to script Leaderstats. So in service script service, we can add in a script and name it to Leaderstats. We can start by creating a function when the player joins the game, so we can do game.players.playerAdded :connect function and set the parameter to player. Now we're going to create a folder for that player called Leaderstats. And we're going to make the name of the folder to Leaderstats. This is very important. You need to make sure that the name is exactly Leaderstats, because if the folder isn't named Leaderstats like this, the game will not recognize it as a leaderboard. So make sure that it is named like this. Now we're going to create an int value for the wins. This is going to be our win counter. So we can do local wins is equal to instance.new int value. Outside the quotations, we're going to do comma leader stats to set the parent to the leader stats. We're going to name it to wins. So wins.name equals to wins. And we're going to set the default value to 0. So when the player is starting, they're going to have 0 wins. And then we can copy this and we're just going to change it to kills. Kills.named is equal to kills and kills.value equals to 0. I made a mistake. This is supposed to say wins.value, not wins. So make sure you put wins.value and kills.value right here. And lastly, we can do leaderstats.parent is equal to player. So when we play the game, you will see that we have leader stats right here. But that is it. This game is pretty lame right now. So let's go ahead and add in our round system. So in server script service, we're going to add in another script. You can go ahead and name this one to round system. We're going to add in a module script inside of the round system script, and we can name it to config, which is short for configuration. Now this module script is going to be very simple at the moment because there's only 2 things we need to have in it. It is probably going to get more complicated in future tutorials. So we can start by doing local config equals to and then pointy brackets, and then we're going to go down a line. So first of all, minimum players is going to equal to 2. So this is the minimum players you require before the game can start. So for me, it's going to be 2. And then at the end of this, you can put a comma or a semicolon. Then we're going to set one more value. So we're going to do countdown time and then equals to 15. Once the minimum players are reached, it is going to count down from this time before starting the game. We can add a semicolon here. And then lastly, outside of the table, we're going to do return config. And yeah, this is all we need for our configuration script at the moment. As I said, it'll get more complicated in the future. Okay, now for the round system, but I did forget 2 things. So in the round system script, we're going to add in an int value, or not an int value, sorry. We're going to add in a bool value, a boolean value, and we're going to name it to game active. We're going to set the value to false, and we can add in another bool value. We're going to name this one counting down, and we're also going to make sure that this one is false as well. Alright, so now for actually scripting our round system, we're going to start with a few variables. First of all, we're going to call our module script that we just created. So we can do local config equals require script colon wait for child config. Now we're going to get the players, so we can do local players is equal to game colon get service players, and we can also get replicated storage as well. So local replicated storage is equal to game colon get service replicated storage, and we're going to call our event inside of replicated storage. So local update text event is equal to replicated storage dot round system events dot update text. So now we're going to create a table called queued players. So we can do local queued players is equal to pointy brackets. So we're just making an empty table right now. When players join the queue, they're going to be added to this table. And then we're going to create another table called active players. Again, it's just going to be empty. When the game starts, the player from the queue will be added to this table. Now we can get the bool values we created a minute ago. So we can do local game active is equal to script colon wait for child game active, and local counting down is equal to script colon wait for child counting down. And we can create a variable for our spawns folder that we created at the beginning. So local spawns is equal to game.workspace colon wait for child spawns. So that is all the variables we need. Now we're going to code our first function called update text. So to do this, we're going to call local function is equal to update text, and we're going to get 2 parameters for this, so message and visible. And we're only going to have 1 line in this function. We're going to do update text events colon fire all clients, and we're going to fire the parameters we got, so message and visible. So whenever this event is fired, it is going to be changing the text and visibility of the label we created earlier. And actually, back in the label, the status text label we added, we can add in a local script. We can copy these 2 variables right here and paste them in the script. And we can add in another variable, so local text label is equal to script.parent. So whenever the event is fired, we're going to call a function. So update text event.onClient event colon connect function, and we're going to get the parameters that we're firing from the server. so message and visible. I'm going to set text label.text to message, and text label.visible is equal to true. I mean, not true, is equal to visible. So basically, if we were to fire this right here, it'll send the message of hello there and visibility of true. So the text label will display hello there and it'll be visible. Now we're going to create our second function to add players to the queue. So we can do local function and we're going to call it queue players. And we're going to check if our game active boolean dot value. So if the game is not active, then we're going to loop through all the players in the game. So for I, comma, players in pairs, we're going to get our players variable, colon, get players. So we're going to loop through all the players in the game, do. So we're going to check if the players are already in the queue because we don't want to add them in the queue twice. So if not, table.find our queued players table, comma, player dot user ID. Then, and also I'm going to change this right here from players to player because it makes more sense. So if the player is not already in the queue, we're going to add them to the queue. So we can do table dot insert queued players, and we're going to add in player dot user ID. So whenever the player joins the game, we're going to call this function to add them to the queue. So we can do players dot player added colon connect queue players. And now we're going to create a function to remove the player from the queue. So if they leave before the game starts and we try to send them into the game, it's going to break the script because they're no longer in the game. So we need to remove them from the queue when they leave. So we can do local function remove player, and we're going to set a parameter of player. We're going to get the player's user ID, so we can do local ID is equal to player dot user ID, and we're going to remove them from the queued players table and the other table, the active players table, if they're in there. So we can do table dot remove queued players, comma, table dot find queued players, comma, ID. Then we can just copy this line and change this from queued players to active players, and here as well. And we'll call this when a player leaves the game. So players dot player removing colon connect remove player, just like this. And we can make sure this is working so far by adding in print player dot name dot has been added to the queue. And over here we can print the opposite, so we can do player dot name has been removed from the game. So when you play, you should see it says Netherite dev has been added to the queue, and when we leave the game, it should print Netherite dev has been removed from the game. So our script is working so far. And now we're going to add in another function called check for players. So local function check for players. And what this function is going to do is before the game starts, it's going to wait until our minimum players are in the game. Remember, this minimum players value we established earlier is going to halt until that many players are in the game. And when that happens, it is going to start counting down. So we can do while task.wait 1 do. So every 1 second we are running this loop. We are checking if game active.value is equal to true, or counting down value is equal to true, because if so, we do not want to run the script because the game is already active. So we're going to do then return end. If the game is already running or there's already a valid amount of players, we do not want to run this function, so we're just going to stop it. And then we can call our queued players function right here. So now we're going to check if there's enough players. So if hashtag queued players is greater than or equal to config.minimum players, then, so if the amount of queued players in the queue is greater than this, we're going to do counting down dot value is equal to true, else we're going to update text. We're going to send the message waiting for players, then comma true. So what this is doing is it's checking if the amount of players in the queue is greater than the number of minimum players. If so, we're going to set the countdown value to true, and if not, we're going to send the message waiting for players. And here we can go ahead and print countdown started. So now we can just go ahead and call the function down here. We can just call check for players, and that should start it. When we play the game and we join, you should see the label up here saying waiting for players, because there's only one player and we need a minimum of 2. If we set minimum players to 1 and then play a game, you will see that as printed countdown started, but obviously the countdown hasn't started yet. We haven't coded that yet. So let's go ahead and do that. So right here, we can go ahead and do countdown.changed :connect function, and we're going to check if the countdown value is true. So if countdown.value is equal to true, then we're going to create a loop that counts down from the countdown time. So we can do for I is equal to config.countdown time, (0, -1, do. So basically what we're saying is every time this loop runs, we are getting our countdown time and subtracting 1 until the number hits 0. Now, obviously players can leave during the queue, and we want to account for that. So if hashtag queued players is less than config.minimum players, then we're going to set the countdown value back to false. So if players left and now there's not enough players, we're going to set the value back to false, and we're going to start back at our check for players function and return. So we're just going to break this function. But if the players haven't left, we're going to do task.wait1. So we're going to wait 1 second, and then we're going to update the text. So we can do starting in ... seconds, and then true. So outside of the for loop, we can just go ahead and copy this if statement and paste it right here. But we're just going to add in a task.wait1 right here, because sometimes the script breaks without it. And then below that, we can just go ahead and add countdown.value is equal to false, gameactive.value is equal to true. And we're going to update text to make it invisible. So we can send empty text and then false to make the label invisible. And lastly, we're going to call a function called gameStart, which we have not established yet. And we can go ahead and print out countdown ended. And then we're going to call a function called gameStart, which we have not established yet. So above our countdown.change function, we're going to do local function gameStart. And here we're going to create another empty table called players setup. So local players setup is equal to pointy brackets. And now we're going to create a true loop. So while true, do. And then we're going to add in a task.wait1 before I forget. So while true, we're going to loop through all the players in the game. So for I, player, in pairs, players, get players, do. We're going to get the player's user ID. So local user ID is equal to player.userid. And we're going to check if the player is in the queue. So we're going to do if table.find queued players user ID and not player setup user ID then. So we're checking if the player is in the queue and if they have not already been teleported to the map, which is what this player setup table is going to be. You're going to remove the player from the queue table. So we're going to do table.remove queued players, table.find queued players, user ID. And instead we're going to insert them into the active players table. So we can do table.insert active players, user ID. And we're also going to add them to the player setup table we just created. So we can do players setup square brackets user ID is equal to true. Now we're going to work on teleporting the player to a random spawn location. So we can do local char is equal to player.character. And local humanoid is equal to char.humanoid. Local humanoid root part is equal to char.humanoid roots part. And now we're going to get a random spawn. So to do this, we're going to get a random number between 1 and the number of spawns that are in this folder here. So we can do local spawn num is equal to math.random1, hashtag spawns get children. So this is getting the number of spawns in the spawns folder, and then whatever that lands on, we are going to find the spawn in the folder. So if it lands on 32, it's going to go to spawn 32 and it's going to teleport the player there. So we can do local spawn parts is equal to spawns and then square brackets spawn num. We're getting the part from the number and we're going to teleport the player there. So humanoid root part.cframe is equal to spawn part dot cframe plus vector3 dot new 0, 5, 0. So we're teleporting them there and putting them 5 studs above the ground so they don't get stuck in the ground. Now we want to check when the player dies because we need to remove them from the game. So to do this, we're going to establish a variable called died connection, which we are just going to leave blank. And then down here, we're going to establish it. So died connection is equal to humanoid.died::connect function. We're establishing a function when the player dies, basically. And then we're just going to call back to our remove player function up here. So we can do remove player, and then we're going to send over the player. And then lastly, we can disconnect this died connection. So died connection : disconnect. So here we're connecting it, and then we're disconnecting it, because if we don't disconnect it, it is going to run this function every single time the player dies. We only want it running the first time we die to remove them from the game. If that makes sense, it doesn't need to run after that. Alright, so now we're going to go down 3 ends above the task.wait, and we're going to check if only one player is left in the match. So we can do if hashtag active players is equal to 1, then, or equals 1, we're going to get the winner. So local winner is equal to players : get player by user ID, and we're going to get active players square brackets 1. So we're getting the user ID of the winner, and we can print winner.name, has 1. So we're just displaying their name and saying they have 1 in the output, and we're going to update the text label saying that they won. So we can do update text winner.name ... has 1, just like we printed here. And then we can just do true. We're going to wait 5 seconds, so task.wait 5, and then we're going to teleport them back up to the lobby. So we can do winner.teleport, or not .teleport, winner.character.humanoid root parts.cframe is equal to workspace.spawnlocation.cframe plus vector3.new 0, 5, 0, and we're going to give them 1 win. So we can do winner.leaderstats.wins.value plus equals 1. Then we're going to set the game active value right here back to false. So game active.value is equal to false, and we are going to restart the loop by calling our check for players function here. So we can do check for players. Lastly, we're going to type break to break this true loop right here. So if we have done everything right, our game should be working so far. So if we go up to the test tab, we can set this to 2 players and click start. This is going to start a session with 2 people. So you can see here I have both of the players. I can just close this real quick, and it says starting in 2, 1. When that's over, it breaks because we did something wrong. Alright guys, stupid mistake. Right here it says humanoid is not a value of RBX script signal. Basically, it's saying that because I put char as player.changed instead of player.character. So make sure you write player.character. So now if we start a test with 2 players, the queue has started again, and once it hits 0, we should both be teleported this time. Yep, we are both in the game, both players here, as you can see. If one of them were to die, it will say up here, player 2 has won the match, and then they're going to get teleported back, and now they have 1 win. The queue is starting again, and that is our round system. Yeah, really simple, and it's just going to repeat and repeat and repeat. And right here on the server side, you can see both of them here. We are getting all the printed messages as well, confirming that everything has been working. Anyways, guys, that is it for this video. I really do hope you enjoyed and it helped you. If you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe for part 2, where we will be coding the ball tracking system, or at least starting to. I'm not sure if we'll get through all of it. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. See you!